Russia isn't just the world's largest country, it might also be the strangest. A place where the extraordinary is part of everyday life.
Stay home, have sex, don't go to work. I mean, what happens today? Nothing?
You give birth on that day, that's the day that you get the prizes.
I mean, where else can you find ordinary citizens with access to weapons of war or furry animals holding military ranks? Oh, and yes, there is a real preserved corpse of a former president on public display, like it is no big deal. From the bizarre to the unbelievable, we're counting down the most mind-blowing and unique things you'll only ever find in Russia. Let's get into it. Number 12. Military Disneyland. American Disneyland may leave you with a phone full of sugar-dusted memories and a blur of pastel dreams. Russia's version. It trades in cotton candy for cold steel.
Russian military Disneyland, where children can clamber over heavy weaponry, even play with grenade launchers.
Welcome to Patriot Park, a place where kids don't line up for teacup rides. They scramble into Soviet tanks with the glee of a child, choosing their favorite horse on a carousel. This isn't your average amusement park. It's Russia's boldest tribute to military might. A kind of military Disneyland where war machines are the main attraction, and patriotism is on full display. Tucked away in the town of Kubinka, just 33 miles from Moscow, this sprawling complex officially opened its gates in 2015 under the direction of President Putin. And it doesn't tiptoe around its intentions. Patriot Park is a full-throttle celebration of Russia's military legacy, one so unfiltered and theatrical, it leaves visitors caught between amazement and unease. Across this surreal landscape, more than 268 Soviet-era aircraft sit frozen mid-flight alongside over 350 tanks from around the globe, curated not just as relics, but as props in an immersive, interactive battleground. Visitors don't just look at the machinery, they climb into cockpits, man-flight simulators, drive tanks, and even take aim with real Kalashnikov rifles at virtual targets. It's hands-on history with a militarized twist. The centerpiece? The Tank Biathlon Arena, a roaring venue that turns warfare into competitive sport, complete with international teams, cheering crowds, and choreographed explosions. But Patriot Park isn't just about tanks and guns. There are dedicated halls for Russia's airborne forces, space and missile exhibits with climbable cosmonaut capsules, and demonstrations so dramatic they feel plucked from a blockbuster film or a recruitment video. Number 11. Legacy of alcohol. There's a reason Russia consistently tops the charts when it comes to alcohol consumption. And it's not just a cultural stereotype, it's baked into history. Back in 1859, vodka sales alone were bankrolling over 40% of the entire Russian government's revenue. Fast forward to 2003, and the country hit its peak consumption, more than 20 liters of pure alcohol per adult per year. That's the equivalent of knocking back a vodka shot every single day. But here's where things get even more surreal. In the 1980s, the official stats were actually underreporting reality. Why? Well, people were brewing their own moonshine and tapping into black market booze at levels so high, even the government couldn't keep track. The line between drink and daily life blurred beyond recognition. For decades, beer wasn't even considered alcohol. Seriously, anything under 10% ABV was labeled a soft drink. Russians were buying beer from sidewalk vendors like it was a can of soda. Vodka? That was practically a food group. It was so embedded in daily life, workers were sometimes paid in bottles instead of rubles. Backyard distilleries flourished, flooding the market with counterfeit liquor that was often toxic. The result? A surge in alcohol poisoning deaths and a dramatic plunge in male life expectancy. By 2010, the government could no longer ignore the crisis. President Dmitry Medvedev cracked down, restricting alcohol sales during late hours and slapping price controls on booze to slow down consumption. It helped, at least on paper, but by then, the damage was done. Russia had already become the country where beer was once treated like water and vodka, like medicine for the soul. And yet, even this tangled saga of national intoxication is just the prelude. Because if you think Russia's history with alcohol is extraordinary, Just wait until you hear about one man whose genetic legacy outpaced even the wildest vodka binge, someone whose reproductive prowess rewrote the very definition of what it means to father a nation. Number 10. Father of many nations. In the small Russian town of Shuya, back in the 18th century, a peasant named Fyodor Vasilyev pulled off something so outrageous, it sounds like folklore with a birth certificate. Born around 1707, Fyodor didn't just raise a big family, he fathered a human avalanche. Not one, not 10, but a jaw-dropping 87 children. It's a number so large it borders on myth, yet the record stands, unmatched and, realistically, unbeatable. Between 1725 and 1765, he and his first wife, Valentina, welcomed this extraordinary brood into the world over the course of 27 pregnancies. But here's where it gets mathematically mind-bending. Of those 27 births, there were 16 pairs of twins, 7 sets of triplets, and 4 sets of quadruplets. Not a single child arrived solo. It was as if their family tree came pre-installed with split branches. Even more astounding, 67 of these children survived past infancy. A statistical miracle in a century where childhood often ended before it began. The monastery of Nikolsk found the tale so remarkable that it officially reported the details to Moscow. But Fyodor's story didn't end there. After Valentina's death, Fyodor remarried and had 18 more children with his second wife, rounding the total to that unbelievable 87. By 1782, at 75 years old, 82 of those children were still alive, roaming the Russian countryside with Fyodor's blood in their veins. Yet in the shadows of Russian history, where truth often wears the mask of legend, stranger phenomena are constantly being discovered. And speaking of the peculiar guardians that have protected Russia's most precious treasures, the tales of four-legged sentinels stalking the marble halls of imperial palaces and the mysteries locked within museum walls will make Fyodor's legacy seem almost ordinary by comparison. Number 9. Furry citizens of the country. What began as a desperate attempt to protect priceless art has slowly morphed into one of the most unusual and charming forms of service in Russian history. It started with Peter the Great, who, after a tour through the Netherlands, brought home a single cat to the palace. But it was his daughter, Empress Elizabeth, who truly embraced the feline cause. She didn't just adopt a few strays, she ordered an entire colony of skilled cats from Kazan, with one mission: hunt the palace rats. What started as basic pest control became something far more official. In 1745, the Empress declared cats the empire's official rat catchers, giving them a title and a job that has lasted centuries. Today, over 50 descendants of those original Kazan hunters roam the basement corridors of the State Hermitage Museum, each one an appointed guardian of the museum's 3 million artworks. But make no mistake, these aren't your average sleepy house cats. They're furry veterans of some of Russia's darkest hours. They survived Napoleon's invasion, weathered the Bolshevik Revolution, and held on through the brutal siege of Leningrad. Tucked away in the lower levels of the museum, these cats are well-fed, well-groomed, and treated like furry royalty. Yet the role of cats in Russia doesn't stop at museum walls. Out at sea, Russian naval crews have long kept cats on board, not just for their mousing skills, but for their supposed sixth sense. Sailors believe cats can sense incoming storms, detect bad luck, and even forecast weather. So much so that ship cats are still part of the Russian Navy, often photographed lounging on deck or curled up beside sailors. One ginger cat even accompanied a military voyage to Syria, purring beneath the radar. Where most nations left such ideas behind as sailors' lore, Russia leaned in and made it tradition. From the basement of imperial palaces to the decks of warships, the cat in Russia isn't just a pet or a pest hunter. It's a quiet symbol of survival, superstition, and state service. Number 8. Radioactive Lake. Lake Karachay was once a serene patch of water tucked away in Russia's southern Ural Mountains, a quiet little place that reflected blue skies, passing clouds, and the illusion of peace. But today, it's the kind of lake you don't swim in, don't boat across, and definitely don't stand near unless you're on a dare with death. Just 60 minutes on its shores is all it takes to kill you. Not by drowning, not by poison, but by something far more sinister. Radiation so strong it could fry you from the inside out before you even break a sweat. This lake doesn't look like a monster. That's part of the horror. It sits inside the Mayak Production Association grounds, looking calm, almost forgettable, until you learn what it's hiding. Dubbed the most polluted place on Earth by the World Watch Institute, Lake Karachay is no tranquil escape. It's a watery time bomb, a still surface masking decades of nuclear recklessness. It all started back in 1951. Soviet engineers, working under a shroud of Cold War secrecy, began dumping nuclear waste straight into the lake as casually as if they were tossing out yesterday's soup. Year after year, barrel after barrel, radioactive waste was poured into its depths. Today, that toxic brew forms an 11-foot-deep blanket of radioactive sludge lining the lakebed, packed with over 12 to 15 million curies of long-lived isotopes like cesium-137 and strontium-90. The nightmare doesn't stop beneath the water. Even the fog that drifts lazily above the surface isn't just moisture, it's death in vapor form. A single gust of wind, a strong storm, or heaven forbid, a tornado, could lift radioactive particles into the air and spread them across the region like invisible poison. That's not a hypothetical. It's happened before. And when the water levels drop, even worse. In dry spells, the lakebed is exposed, turning lethal sludge into radioactive dust. One breeze is all it takes to scatter contamination across miles. But perhaps the most chilling part? The danger doesn't stay confined to Karachay. The radioactive cocktail at its bottom seeps into nearby groundwater, threatening the surrounding land like an invisible cancer. Even the mist that hovers gently above the lake on a cold morning carries the specter of death, whispering silent warnings to any soul foolish enough to venture near. Yet, as terrifying as this atomic lake may be, it pales in comparison to what awaits us next, a government initiative so audaciously intimate that it would make even the most progressive societies blush with curiosity. Number 7. Russia's most intimate holiday. What if patriotism didn't mean marching in parades or waving a flag, but dimming the lights, turning up the romance, and making young citizens for your country? In one of the boldest, most blush-worthy social experiments imaginable, Russia's Ulyanovsk region, the birthplace of Vladimir Lenin, turned September 12th into a national call to action between the sheets. Officially known as the Day of Conception, this state-backed holiday didn't just encourage romance, it incentivized it. Couples who conceived on that date and gave birth exactly 9 months later, on June 12th, Russia Day, were rewarded by the local government. And we're not talking about symbolic gestures. We're talking real, tangible prizes. Brand new SUVs, electronics, even cash. Picture this: an entire region where, on a Wednesday morning, streets are silent, offices half empty, curtains drawn, and not because of a snowstorm. It's because citizens were heeding a very different kind of civic duty, one laid out by the regional governor himself.
Skip work, have sex. That's the message from the governor of a central Russian province who is urging couples to stay home today and take care of business, so to speak.
Who urged people to skip work and do their patriotic part in bed. It was part public policy, part social experiment, and part bizarre game show, except the stakes were life itself. The math had to be perfect. Conceive on September 12th, deliver on June 12th, and boom, you're a contender in Russia's weirdest, most intimate lottery. As baby-making became a state-sponsored event, a new kind of buzz began swirling through Ulyanovsk. While some citizens were drawing the curtains for bedroom duty, others were heading toward a very different kind of gathering place. One that didn't celebrate the making of life, but an entirely different kind of Russian pride. And trust us, what came next made Day of Conception look downright ordinary. Number 6. The display of Lenin. They say the dead should be left to rest, yet a man who died nearly a century ago still greets thousands of visitors each day with the same serene composure he possessed in life. In the Red Square of Moscow, Russia, under the imposing shadow of the Kremlin's ancient walls, lies the body of the first leader of the Soviet Union. Since 1924, Vladimir Lenin's body has remained on public display for 4 days a week, seemingly unchanged from the day of his death, thanks to embalming, encased in a glass sarcophagus that transforms mortality into an impossible dance with eternity. The cube-shaped mausoleum, designed by architect Alexei Shchusev as a symbol of eternity, houses not merely a corpse, but a triumph of human ingenuity over nature's most inexorable law, decay itself. The dark granite tomb conceals secrets that would make Frankenstein himself envious, for within its depths is a laboratory where specific teams of biochemists, anatomists, and biologists set up only for Lenin's preservation perform their artistry with scientific precision that borders on the supernatural. Lenin now bears artificial eyelashes, his original ones lost to early embalming experiments, while his nose, face, and eye sockets have been meticulously resculpted. The preservation team employs micro-injection techniques, threading individual hypodermic syringes filled with embalming agents directly into specific portions of the body, while synthetic eyeballs prevent his orbital cavities from collapsing, and his remains are annually soaked in solutions of glycerol and potassium acetate. His body literally lives on, as there is even a technique that makes it look like he's still breathing. This is not merely preservation, it is resurrection in reverse. A man suspended between life and death in perpetual repose, watched over by silent guards who usher reverent pilgrims past his glass-encased form in a hushed procession. But Lenin's eternal slumber is just the beginning of Russia's collection of impossibilities, for in the frozen reaches of the north lies Fort Zarev, where an entirely different kind of preservation has taken place. A gory preservation that defies not biological laws, but the very fabric of time itself. Number 5. Fort Zarev. The laws of physics are usually upheld in most cases and natural situations, but this is not the case with Fort Zarev, a place where the same laws of physics seemed to bend, and solid brick walls cascaded downward like frozen waterfalls of molten stone, defying everything you thought you knew about fire and flame. Hidden within the desolate shores of the Baltic Sea in northern Kronstadt, Fort Zarev tells a story of how things can change in an instant. During a fire outbreak that burned for weeks, the temperatures were so infernal that they transformed centuries-old masonry into grotesque sculptures of melted horror. Built in the 1860s by visionary engineer Konstantin Zarev, this mushroom-shaped fortress was revolutionary for its time, as it was the first in Russia to utilize asphalt as a building material. When it stood tall, its floors gleamed with natural bitumen solutions, and for over a century, it served as a stalwart guardian of the Gulf of Finland's northern fairway, later repurposed as an ammunition depot and military training ground, where the echoes of practice artillery still reverberated through its curved corridors. Then came 1970, the year Fort Zarev experienced an apocalypse of fire. A devastating fire broke out that raged for several weeks, creating temperatures up to 2,000 degrees centigrade, hot enough to melt the very bricks themselves. When the inferno finally subsided and investigators dared to enter the cooled remains, they discovered something that defied comprehension. The basement ceiling had literally melted and dripped downward like stalactites in some hellish cave. Some speculate that the Russians were testing a new kind of weapon, possibly a high phosphorus-containing compound similar to napalm that burned at temperatures in excess. Others whisper of carelessly discarded lubricants and decommissioned ammunition igniting into an uncontrollable chemical nightmare. The truth remains buried beneath layers of melted stone and military secrecy, leaving Fort Zarev as Russia's most haunting reminder that some fires burn so hot they can turn solid walls into liquid terror. But while you think about Russia and its affinity for strange occurrences, share this video with someone who needs to hear this, because we're about to discover a regulation so bizarre and so incomprehensibly specific about the most intimate garments we wear that it makes a nearly melted house seem perfectly reasonable by comparison. Number 4. The underwear ban. In 2014, a peculiar decree that would make even the most seasoned traveler raise an eyebrow was passed in Russia. Yes, believe it or not, lacy underwear and lingerie is banned in Russia. This edict is so bizarre that it challenges the essence of feminine allure itself, stripping away something intimate and delicate. What could possibly unite the governments of 3 mighty nations in unanimous condemnation of something so fundamentally personal, so quietly beautiful, that its mere mention sends ripples of bewilderment across continents? The answer lies in Russia's extraordinary ban on synthetic lace underwear, implemented as part of the Eurasian Customs Union regulations that took effect that year. The Russian government, alongside Belarus and Kazakhstan, declared war on delicate lace panties and synthetic lingerie, citing health concerns over moisture absorption and retention. The law mandates that all clothing touching the skin must contain at least 6% cotton, while lace and synthetic materials only achieve between 3 to 3.6% absorption rates. The surreal spectacle reached fever pitch when women took to the streets holding underwear in protest, their defiant voices challenging the new law against their rights. This legislative thunderbolt transformed Russia into a land where cotton reigns supreme and lace becomes contraband, where the state peers into the most private chambers of personal choice with the solemnity of a Supreme Court ruling on national security. While it deeply affected the Russian citizens, anyone who chooses to visit in the future would have to reconsider packing lace and lingerie undergarments, as imports into the country were banned as well. Funny as it may sound, the ban on the precious lace undergarments of Russian women is quite trivial compared to a different chapter of Russia's peculiar governance, one involving a different kind of personal grooming that once required men to literally pay for the privilege of their own facial hair. Number 3. Beard tax. Welcome to Peter the Great's Russia, where the simple act of sporting facial hair could drain your coffers faster than a night of gambling, and where men walked the razor's edge between spiritual identity and imperial decree. In 1698, Tsar Peter I of Russia, after a tour in Europe, instituted a beard tax as part of an effort to bring Russian society in line with Western European models. Because the Western European men were clean-shaven, Peter believed Russia was outdated in appearance, and by imposing the tax, it would bring the country up to speed, transforming the most intimate aspects of masculinity into matters of state revenue and social engineering. With a physical demonstration during the celebration of his return, Peter himself took a pair of scissors and shaved the beards of the men present. The audacious monarch decreed that traditional Russian beards, symbols of orthodox piety and masculine dignity for centuries, would henceforth cost their wearers dearly. For nobility and merchants, the tax could be as high as 100 rubles annually. For commoners and peasants, they could keep their beards, but they had to shave every time they entered a city. Those who dared defy the clean-shaven imperial vision faced a fate more humiliating than any financial penalty. The Tsar empowered police to forcibly and publicly shave those who refused to pay the tax, turning the very streets into theaters of follicular persecution. Yet for those who paid their dues, salvation came in the form of precious beard tokens, copper or silver medals showing a nose, mustache, and beard on one side and the imperial eagle on the reverse, tangible proof that in Peter's Russia, even the hair on your face belonged to the state, and freedom could quite literally be purchased one whisker at a time. Although beard taxes do not exist anymore, there is another kind of tradition that embraces the opposite extreme, where people plunge their bodies into waters so frigid they could stop a heart. Number 2. A tradition of cold baths. Have you ever been so cold that you felt the blood freeze in your veins? This is the threat the Russians constantly face because of a tradition going back several years. While citizens in other countries layer their clothing during the winter to stay warm, Russians break the norm by taking a dip in the icy waters. The tradition of bathing in ice holes is integrated into both sacred ceremony and folk custom, complete with elaborate processions and mystical superstitions that shrouded the ritual in otherworldly significance. What happens across Russia's frozen landscape every winter is nothing short of extraordinary, a union of human endurance played out against nature's most brutal backdrop. During the Epiphany, in a twisted recreation of Christian baptism, Russian believers mark the event by reenacting that baptism in ponds and rivers, plunging into freezing water blessed by a priest, through holes cut in the ice, a threefold immersion that believers claim purifies both body and soul while banishing evil spirits from their mortal vessels. But it's much more than that. This practice reveals a nation that has learned to dance with death itself, finding in the embrace of liquid ice not just physical invigoration, but spiritual transcendence that defies all earthly logic. It might send chills down your spine, literally, but it will prepare you for a discovery in the depths of Siberia's most unforgiving corner, a place where the very air itself becomes a living entity, and human existence teeters on the razor's edge of impossibility. Number 1. The last ice age on Earth. Imagine a place where your breath crystallizes mid-air, your eyelashes shatter like glass with each blink, and where the very ground beneath your feet hasn't thawed in millennia. Deep within the Sakha Republic of northeastern Russia, in a valley where mountains conspire to trap Arctic air like prisoners in an icy dungeon, there is a settlement that forces you to experience what the Ice Age was like. This is Oymyakon, a village considered the coldest inhabited place on Earth. Here, winter isn't just a season, it's a 6-month siege where temperatures average -58 degrees Fahrenheit or -50 degrees centigrade. In the summer, the temperature only climbs as high as 35 degrees centigrade and lasts for a few months before winter hits again. In 1924, the winter temperature made a world record of the lowest temperature at -96 degrees Fahrenheit. But regardless of the freezing climate and unforgiving temperature, approximately 500 residents call Oymyakon home, their existence a living proof that humans are resilient. These Arctic warriors live in a realm where roads freeze completely during winter and where even eyelashes can freeze, transforming everyday survival into an epic saga of adaptation. Cars are left running to keep them from freezing, pipes freeze and burst, leading to manual water collection and management, and outdoor baths. The ground beneath their feet remains permanently frozen, creating a foundation as solid and unforgiving as granite, which has to be thawed before anyone can be buried in it. But how do they survive? The residents center their lives around self-sufficiency, animal husbandry, hunting, fishing, and wood harvesting. Their daily existence unfolds like scenes from a frozen fairy tale, where each breath becomes visible poetry and where the simple act of stepping outside requires the courage of an explorer venturing into the unknown. Did you enjoy our video? Subscribe to our channel and get notified of more interesting videos. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.